You have already decided to change, but even so, it feels like something is pulling you back, as if there were a part of you that does not follow the change you chose. This creates a strange feeling. It feels like doubt. It feels like anxiety. Sometimes it even feels like you are regressing, but you are not. What you are feeling is not failure. It is a signal. Your old version is still active, trying to maintain the pattern it knows. And the most curious thing is that this happens even when you have already decided to change. Now pay attention to this. There is a point in this process that, when you understand it, everything stops seeming confusing and starts to make sense. Frequency of the conflict between intention and internal state. Here is where everything begins to get stuck without you realizing it. You have already decided to change. You already know what you want. You even think differently in some moments. But you still feel the same as before. And this misalignment creates a very specific feeling. You want to move forward, but something inside seems to pull you back. This generates doubt, anxiety, and that feeling that nothing is moving. But here is the key that changes everything. It is not your decision that is weak, it is your state that has not caught up yet. Now think about daily life. You decide to be more confident, but in a simple situation, you still feel insecure. Or you decide to stop worrying so much, but your mind goes back to the same pattern hours later. This is not inconsistency, it is transition. And when you understand this, you stop fighting the process and start adjusting the right point. The feeling, because it is the feeling that sustains any change. Without it, everything becomes an attempt. With it, everything begins to gain strength. Frequency of unconscious focus on the old scenario. And here is the silent mistake that keeps everything the same, even when you want to change. Without realizing it, your mind still revisits the past all the time. Small memories, old worries, repeated internal dialogues. And this seems normal, but it is not neutral. Where your attention is, your energy is. And this keeps the cycle active. Now observe something simple. You want to move forward, but you spend a good part of your day thinking about what went wrong, what did not work, what is still missing. This reinforces exactly the scenario you want to leave. Now change one detail. Instead of letting your mind run on autopilot, you begin to notice where it is going and redirect it. You do not need to force it. You just need to notice and adjust. A practical example. You start thinking about a problem, but instead of going deeper, you change the question to, what can I build from here? This changes the flow immediately. And this type of adjustment, repeated throughout the day, begins to break the old cycle without excessive effort. And here comes the most important point. Even when you start adjusting focus and feeling, there is still something deeper that explains why everything feels so automatic. And that is exactly what we are going into now. Sign of emotional memory still dominant. Here is one of the most important points, and almost no one understands this clearly. Many times it is not that you are thinking wrong, it is that your body has already learned to react even before the thought appears. You do not decide to feel that. You just notice when you are already feeling it. And this gives the impression that you are stuck, but you are not. This is emotional memory. Now pay attention to this different example. Imagine that you always opened a message from a specific person expecting a problem. Over time, just seeing the person's name makes your body tense, even before reading. This is a record. Now bring this to your life in general. Situations, environments, even times of day activate automatic responses in you. And most people try to change this by thinking differently. But the real point is another. Here is a practical tip that almost no one uses. Instead of trying to change the thought at the moment of emotion, change the rhythm of your body first. Slower breathing, more relaxed posture, slowing down movement. This breaks the automatic pattern before it grows. Another powerful adjustment. Name what you are feeling in a low voice or mentally. This is just an old pattern activating. This creates distance. You stop confusing yourself with the feeling, and this small space already gives control back to you. And if this is making sense to you, comment something like, "I am not my pattern." Because when you write this, you begin to reinforce a new internal perception. And if you want to keep understanding these points that almost no one explains this way, subscribe to the channel. Because this is not motivation. It is understanding that changes behavior. And now comes the point that really turns the game around. Frequency of conscious repetition creating the turning point. Here is the moment where everything truly begins to change. It is not what you do once. It is not one good day. It is not a moment of clarity. It is what you sustain repeatedly. Most people underestimate this because they want to feel a strong, immediate change. But what truly transforms is simpler and quieter, repeating the new state until it becomes familiar. Now think about this in your day. You can have good moments but you do not repeat them with intention. Now, change one detail. Every time you notice that you accessed a better state, calmer, more confident, clearer, you mark it internally and return to it throughout the day, without excessive effort, but with intention. Another practical example. Choose a small behavior to repeat, such as responding more calmly, speaking with more presence, or pausing before reacting. This seems simple, but repeated many times, it begins to weaken the old pattern without confrontation. And here is the key. You do not need to destroy the old. You just need to stop reinforcing it and start repeating the new. Because the brain and body learn through repetition, not intensity. And when this repetition begins to happen, something changes naturally. The old loses strength, the new gains space, and without realizing it, you no longer react as before. But there is still one point that completely changes how you see yourself in this process. And that is what truly frees you once and for all. Sign of awareness of the active pattern changing everything internally. Here a shift happens that many people take years to understand. You begin to realize that it is not you failing. It is a pattern running. And this completely changes how you treat yourself in the process. Because while you believe that the problem is you, guilt, frustration, and self-criticism arise. But when you realize it is a pattern, you leave conflict and enter adjustment. Now think about this in a practical way. Before, when something went wrong, you thought, I always do this. I cannot change. Now you begin to observe differently. Look at the old pattern showing up again. This creates space between you and the reaction. And this space changes everything. Another simple example. You notice that you are entering anxiety, but instead of sinking into it, you identify this is automatic. It is not a decision. Just this awareness already reduces the intensity. And here is the key. Awareness is not meant to judge you. It is meant to reposition you. When you see the pattern, you have a choice. And when you have a choice, you are no longer stuck. And that is exactly what weakens the automatic. Because the pattern needs unconsciousness to stay strong. When you start to see it, it loses strength, frequency of stability, before the result consolidating everything. Now we reach the point that closes the process, and that almost no one respects. Most people want to see results first, and then believe, but in practice, the movement is the opposite. The external only follows when the internal becomes consistent. And this requires something that few people sustain. Stability. It is not intensity. It is not excitement. It is stability. Now observe this in your day. You access a good state, but you keep waiting for something to happen quickly to validate it. When it does not happen, you oscillate. And this oscillation restarts the process. Now change this. You maintain the state even without external proof. You keep thinking, feeling, and acting aligned, even in silence. This is internal maturity. Another very real example. You begin to act differently, but no one notices yet. The tendency is to go back. But when you sustain it even without recognition, something begins to consolidate. Because reality does not respond to what you do when it is easy. It responds to what you sustain when there is still no confirmation. And here is the strongest point of all. When your state no longer depends on what happens outside, the outside begins to follow. Not by magic, but because you stopped oscillating. And when you stop oscillating, reality has no other option but to respond. And here is the point that almost no one talks about. But that completely changes the way you see all of this. At some point, you realize that you are no longer trying to change. You have already changed internally, but you are still waiting for the world to catch up. And that is exactly where many people get stuck, because they start to doubt in silence. Now pay close attention to this. You already think differently. You already react differently in many moments. You already notice things that you did not even see before. But since the external has not completely changed yet, your mind tries to conclude it has not happened yet. But it has. It just has not finished yet. And here comes a simple adjustment, but a decisive one. Stop using the external as an immediate thermometer. Start using your state. If you are already more aware, more stable, less automatic, then the process has already started. Another very real example. Before, a situation would dominate you for hours. Now it still affects you, but you recover faster. That is change. Before, you did not even notice the pattern. Now you notice it in the middle of it. That is progress. And this is where many people lose the result because they ignore these internal changes for seeming small. But these are exactly what build the new pattern. Now let me ask you a simple question and answer it honestly. Have you already noticed that today you are not exactly the same as you were months ago? If the answer is yes, then you have already left the old point. And that means your reality has already started to reorganize, even if you still do not see everything. And if this made sense to you so far, comment something like, "It has already started," because this is not just interaction. It reinforces the direction you are taking. And if you want to continue developing this level of awareness, not superficial, but real, subscribe to the channel. Because this kind of understanding does not just motivate, it changes how you live. Because in the end, your old version does not disappear all at once. It loses strength little by little, and the new version does not appear suddenly. It is built decision by decision, perception by perception. And when you sustain this for long enough, it is no longer about trying to change your life. It is about realizing that you are already living in a different way. And reality is just finishing catching up to that.